welcome to Unlock Your Life. This is your host, Jennings Smith. Guys, I've got an awesome guest on today, Mr. Cris Bell of RPM Property Management. 20 years in the game, has managed over 1,000 apartment units, single family homes, been with RPM for 16 years, bought and exited 3 RPM franchises, and I think he just bought his 9th franchise, so very entrenched in the property management. Also a personal friend of mine who took over 5 of my properties, is still actively managing some of my properties, knows his stuff when it comes to operations and how to turn these multifamily units around. I know you're going to get a lot of value about that. And also, he just closed his very first deal that he owns, that he's the general partner of. He raised the capital, got the loan, got the thing closed, and is in the midst of stabilizing that and creating value. So Cris, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining me, man.
James, thank you so much for having me here. It's awesome to be on the Unlock Your Life podcast. I think the message that you're trying to push to people and just change the way they think about things is just so awesome. I wish I had something like this years and years and years ago. I didn't realize how important our mindset was in the groups that we were in, how important that was to everything that we want to have in our lives. So super cool. Glad to be here. And hopefully the listeners can get some value from what I've spent over 20 years of my life doing on the management side.
You know, Yaden and I were in the truck on the way home talking about our kids and wishing that maybe we had gotten into real estate earlier and this and that. But, you know, nothing is wasted, right? I mean, the skills that we build, they translate. And I think that they help you create those successes. But yeah, man, I want to just sort of give a little bit of color to the audience listening about how I met you. And so I was at a conference up in Virginia, Richmond, that my cousin Ralph had put on. And there was an asset management guy there, Merlin, and talking to them about how they were helping property owners with the asset management side. I felt like this was an area that I was weak in. I really wanted to dig in. And I was having some trouble on 4 or 5 of my properties with some vacancy, delinquency, et cetera. And I thought Merlin could help me turn this ship around. And so he jumped in, started getting on calls, and quickly we kind of realized, look, probably the best course to go is to switch property managers. And Merlin, based out of North Dakota, was not able to do that. But he said, hey, I can work alongside of Cris. Cris is awesome. He knows his stuff. He's got the time and resources to dedicate to this. So I interviewed with Cris. We talked about where we are with these 5 properties. And I kind of want to dig into Clemson a little bit because when we first hired you, we immediately dumped that property in your lap, which was going under contract or maybe already under contract. And it was in trouble. Like I needed to get that thing sold. I had floating rate debt on it. I had struggles with occupancy. I had struggles with finishing the renovations. And if I didn't get this deal to go through, I was going to be losing money for my investors, which we don't want to happen. So what was your perspective in those early days? What was this, maybe 3.5 years ago at this point?
Yeah, it was somewhere in that time frame. It was super interesting because on our end, James, we were working so diligently to kind of get things together for the other properties in the portfolio. And I think because there was a contract on the property on Clemson and things were kind of moving forward, nobody really wanted to disrupt the apple cart. So it was basically the idea was leave the current management in place, just let them see this sale through. And long story short, we kind of get a call and it's like, hey, the manager has left the keys in the office. They're out. And it was like, oh, man. So basically, we jumped on a flight the next day after learning that, flew into town, went to the property, met with one of the GP's maintenance guys there at the property. The maintenance guy drove across the state to meet us there. And basically, literally that day, the next day after learning that kind of old management was out, we're in place and we've got to clean this thing up, walk in all of the units and just trying to assess kind of what was there. and a lot of the units were vacant, and in some state of repair. They were, um, I think a lot of them had been spray painted, but the kitchens were out of them, the bathrooms were out. It was they were working through a process, and all work had come to a stop. There were Connex boxes on site that were full of materials. Nobody knew what was in what Connex box. It was crazy to say the least, but it was super exciting because it was like, hey, here's a property. It's like being dropped into a war zone. Go figure it out. Nobody wanted to talk to us. Nobody wanted to tell us, kind of who was doing what, where things were at. So it was like literally we just had to figure it out, and that's what we walked into. Basically a day after finding out that old management was done.
Yeah, because it was a little bit of an adversarial transfer. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it was. We were at what were you saying? 76, 78% occupancy.
Yeah, it was mid to like 75 to 78, somewhere in that range occupancy, and it was crazy because there were some people that were like on the leases, but it was like a corporate lease where the corporation had leased the units, but there was actually nobody living in the units. So we're like knocking on doors, figuring all of that out, like who's actually supposed to be living here, that kind of thing. And then obviously there were some that were just blatantly obvious. The doors were wide open and nobody was there.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about this was in our contract with the buyer, we had assured them we would get this thing to 90% occupancy over the next 60 to 90 days by the time they closed, because that was one of their loan requirements. The lender was not going to give them the loan without us hitting 90-day occupancy. And so it was just imperative that we hit that, or this was going to. And if you want to dig deeper into that deal, look at the podcast, $6.1 million deal gone wrong. It's one of my most popular, most listened to. Everybody loves the war stories and the tough things that happen in this. And I kind of break down that deal and how we got there. But beyond that, you were also taking on our property in Moncks Corner, 2 properties in Moncks Corner, one in Georgia, one in Moline, and then Clemson. So it was not just the Clemson was the most pressing deal at the time, but there was $170 something thousand in delinquency across those other 4 properties as well. And they were at various levels of occupancy and repairs needed. And so it was really a massive thing to lay on you at the time. And I was kind of at my wit's end of, I knew that I couldn't focus on this and do this 100%, but it was like a who, not how. Who can help me? And between Merlin and Cris, I saw a path forward, and it worked thanks to Cris, and that they really did open my eyes to the operational pieces of this business and the asset management, the metrics that you need to be watching day in, day out. Because as I got into this, I'm asking the property managers, like, okay, what do we need to do? What does your reporting look like? And most PMs are kind of, they just sort of want to be left alone, do their own thing. And Merlin brought in that, like, we need to be looking at this metric. We need to be looking at occupancy every week. We need to be looking at cash in the bank. We need to be looking at how many leads did we get from our advertising campaign? How many of those converted to applications? How many were denied? How many were approved? Where are we at on our repairs and maintenance? Like, people are putting in work orders. Do you have 50 open work orders? And that's going to upset your tenants, and the good tenants are going to leave because the landlord is never fixing anything. And looking at those metrics, like week after week after week after week, they started to improve. What we focus on improves, and now Cris knows, okay, these are the things that we need to be working on. And this is how we're going to push this marketing. This is how we're going to push these leases. And slowly we turned it around. I mean, where were we? I think at one point our delinquency was like $3,000 or something across those same 5 properties within 6 or 7 months. It was incredible.
Yeah, we went in with a benchmark. We knew from some of the properties that we had managed that are like, basically call it C class, low B class properties that our delinquency rate should be 5% or less. Typically, if we're putting in and qualifying the residents, we can get it to be a little bit lower. But we knew that basically where it was at, it was just way out of line. And we knew it had to do something with the application prospect of it. And a lot of times what happens when you have third party management and then they've got a property manager who's on site, a lot of times that property manager on site is totally incentivized on occupancy. Just get occupancy. So what ends up happening is any person who walks through the door that wants a unit, they're basically approving them. They're figuring out a way within whatever framework they've been given to approve the person so that they can show their boss, hey, look, we're at 95% occupancy, 100% occupancy, whatever the number is, and not understanding the ramifications of putting somebody in who doesn't have a job, putting somebody in who left another complex and was still owing money or was in the process of an eviction, just not understanding the ramifications of what they were doing. They were trying to solve for the problem that they were given. Their KPI was occupancy, and they were doing everything they could to fill occupancy, not paying attention to what happens on the back end of that.
Dude, that is a really big mouthful that you said there. And I want the listeners to stop and think about that, because we had our conference 2 weeks ago, and Cris was there, and Tim Brott spoke about, I think it was maybe a 300 or 400 unit complex. It was a large complex, and the management company had the same incentives that Cris was just talking about. It's like they're getting bonused on new leases. They're reporting to the management, who's then reporting to the owners. Oh, look, we just signed 10 more leases this week. And they ended up moving in 200 unqualified tenants by doing whatever it takes to get them approved, even helping them falsify applications to get them to approve it. If the credit report came back bad, they would still override that and approve them. Now they've got 200 tenants in there that, one, they're not paying. Two, typically a non-paying tenant is a disruptive tenant, and they are, causing issues and causing crime and bringing unsavory characters into the complex. And then the good people who are paying, they don't want to put up with that. And so they're moving and they're leaving. And it creates like a catastrophic death spiral on an apartment complex that is really just an unintended consequence of, well, you told me to fill up the apartment complex. I filled it up. And without the right vetting of those people, it's going to compound into a huge problem. And I think that's, what had happened, where if you're not willing as a property manager to have these difficult conversations of, look, we got 15 people leads, we got 5 applications, but 3 of them were no good. We only signed 2 leases this week. Property manager doesn't really want to tell the ownership group that. Ownership group doesn't really want to hear that. They want to hear, hey, we signed 10 leases this week, because that's that initial dopamine hit of, great, now our occupancy just went from 84 to 87%. Awesome, we're going on the right track. But you're not, because in 3 months, not only do you, is your occupancy dropping again, you have people in tenants that aren't, or tenants in buildings that aren't paying, and you can't get them out for a long period of time. It's expensive.
Yeah, I think one of the other things here, Jennings, it's really important if, like your listeners, just think about this as a metric. If people are paying for applications, so whatever the payment is, $50 for an application, typically we're declining an application and approving an application on every unit that we fill. So a metric you could look at is basically how many applications are being declined. Because if you're putting people in properties and you don't have any declined applications, your standards are too low.
That's a great question to ask your property management. How many applications are you declining?
Yep, absolutely. And, there's a lot that goes into this. There's some programs now on the security deposit side that's like security deposit alternatives that are helping out. We've run the gamut, everything from, say, rhino.com to obligo.com. You want to have a security deposit of some sort in place, whether that's the insurance side, whether that's Obligo, whether that's an actual security deposit in place. one of the things you don't want to do really is like forego any security deposit. And a lot of times we see on complexes that are, B and C's, they're trying to mimic the same thing that Class A's are doing, and it's basically eliminating security deposits for people that have 800 credit scores or whatever, and it could really put the property in a bad position down the road.
Now, if someone's not familiar with Obligo or Rhino, what is that?
So it's basically an alternative to a security deposit. So say Rhino is an insurance product, so it's basically just like normal old insurance, and Obligo is essentially like a bond. So they're guaranteeing the rent if there or yeah, like the rent and the damages if there's anything on the property, right? So instead of the tenant coming, let's just say the rent's 1,000, the security deposit's going to be 1,000. What they could do is qualify for one of those two programs, and they may only have to pay 250 up front, and maybe they're spending $40 a month for the right to have that kind of like insurance. And then it allows the tenant to get into the property less expensively, but it gives the ownership in the property group basically all of the backstops that they would have as if somebody had put up a cash deposit.
Gotcha. So it's a little mini insurance policy. It's like if they don't wreck their car, insurance company's making money. If they do wreck the car, the insurance company's going to pay for it. So if they come in and they pay their rent and they serve their lease and they and they leave without damages, Rhino made money on that deal. But if they are a crappy tenant and they got to be evicted, Rhino will. I mean, they'll not only pay the damages, they'll also pay lost rent. Is that right?
They will up to a certain point, and a lot of times they've got like little programs within what they do. So you could, I know, say Rhino at one point they had like properties we had in New York. We could basically have a policy for a full year's worth of rent because in New York it takes forever to evict somebody.
Right. So we've used this program. I'm always wondering how difficult is it though for them to pay out claims? What was your experience with that?
Claims weren't that bad, right? They did pretty well with that. Typically within 3 weeks or so, you'd get the funds on it. Obviously, like any security deposit claim, you've got to have proof. You've got to have your pictures. You've got to have your invoices. You have to prove it, right? One of the areas that we saw that started making things more difficult for us, specifically with the Rhino policies, was their vetting criteria. So even on their vetting criteria, we had to get a little bit more stringent on our vetting criteria. So basically people could land and get those products.
Gotcha. So you had been mainly focused on single family rentals, and that was your business. And you've made the jump into multifamily and learned the ins and outs through the crucible over the last 3.5 years. And now you've got some exciting news. So tell us about jumping from PM employee to the ownership side.
Yeah, that's been really cool. I think from our standpoint, probably 15 years ago, we managed a 38 unit complex for somebody. It was about 50% occupied. We didn't know what we didn't know, right? We filled it up. We did the best we could with it, turned it around. Things were going great. That owner sold the property. I remember at the time, he asked me, he said, "Cris, do you want to buy the property?" It was 38 units. He was asking $2 million for it. I didn't have $2 million at the time. I was like, I can't figure out how to make the numbers work. I didn't have a resource like the deal room to go to even ask questions. And in hindsight, I kicked myself in the butt because I should have bought it. It was about 60,000. It was about 60,000 a unit. It's about 125 now. And so you roll that forward, right? Like you're managing, you're doing all this hard work. There's nothing sexy about property management. It's a grind. Like nobody's getting rich doing property management. And I see people making money on the multifamily side. I've got single family properties of my own, so of course I'm investing, I'm in the market, but I didn't have any apartment complexes. Going to the event you talked about in Richmond really started to open my eyes to what was possible. Getting in groups like the Deal Room, and then working on some of your properties, Jennings, it just helped open my eyes to like what's possible, right? So then I start looking, and probably for 2 years I was looking for a complex to invest in, put my own money in. And long story short, we found a 52 unit here in my backyard in Norfolk, Virginia, and basically we raised $2.6 million on it. It was a $7.5 million purchase. Started out negotiating at like I think 8.2 is where the start was. Negotiated down to 7.5, and got the seller to carry back about 4.9 million of the loan. So we didn't actually have to go to a bank and get a loan. And partly what it was is the seller, his family was just looking to get a solid rate of return on their money. They didn't want to have to go deploy that money into another deal because they had gotten money from the sale of a business that they had. So they bought this property, the 52 units. They had kicked out not all of the tenants, but about 40% of the tenants, because their plan was to renovate all of these units. And about the same time that happened, they got a sweetheart deal on a 178 unit complex. So they needed the money, basically the equity portion of this, the 2.6 essentially that we raised, to roll into this 178 unit deal. So I worked with them for about 9 months on getting the property in the right shape, raising the money. Had some other really key partners on the deal that were able to raise monies. They pulled some 1031 money from other deals that they had done, put this whole thing together, and I'm super excited about it, man. We're looking, basically a 5-year, 10% cash on cash on it, and somewhere in the 17 to 19% IRR and about 2.1% equity multiple in 5 years. But it's a solid property. It's in a B area, up and coming, near a local hospital that had over $150 million of basically improvements to a hospital locally. So anyway, and we shot our pro forma. We're super conservative on the pro forma at $1,525 for rents, and the first two that we leased them at $1,630. So we're 105 over pro forma. So just super excited on this one.
Yeah, that's great. If you can keep on doing that 52 more times or 50 more times, that's going to be a good value add. And he said 2.1%. I think he meant 2.1 equity multiple. So what it means is if they've invested 2.4 million or 2.5 million, they hope to generate 5 million, right? So return the 2.5, generate another 2.5 for the investor base, plus the GP side of the deal. So that sounds like a solid deal. And now, you casually mentioned we raised $2.5 million. Talk to me about that, because that's probably one of the biggest things that people are afraid of. Like, how would I get that kind of money? How'd that happen?
So great question. I can't take all of the credit for it, but I can take credit for basically putting the partners together that made this all come together. We put together just a small, like I call it a pitch deck, really, that said, hey, this is what we've done in the past. This is what we've done for complexes. And then we put together a pitch deck on this deal and said, hey, this is what we're looking for. And once we we actually got some other property managers to invest. So, which was pretty cool to have colleagues of mine say, hey, what do you got going on? Like, I'll give you $100,000. Here it is. No big deal. But once we got our first investor that basically came on board and said, hey, I'm going to bring $1 million at 1031 into this deal. Like, it was like the linchpin that basically unlocked the floodgates, because we literally had 2 more guys. Because he had a track record, because he put in $1 million, they each put in $500,000. So it was like boom, 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 like super quick. And it was basically build the trust with the one guy who was willing to put in the big check. And once he did, it was like the other people that were on the sidelines were like, oh yeah, I'll give you $500,000.
Yeah.
So
I,
that it was like dominoes.
I like that. I know that feeling. I actually had he was an agency debt underwriter who was a very wealthy guy, investor. I had rehabbed his house on Sullivan's Island, and I pitched him on my Tulsa deal. And when he committed, I don't know, 150 grand to the deal, I was like, okay, I got to have a good deal because this guy underwrites for a living, and he thinks it's a solid deal and he's willing to go in with me. And
Yep.
it is. It's a good confirmation. Well, that's amazing. And so first raise, pretty big raise, $2.5 million. That's no small feat to get that together and collected and get it closed. And I really like how you're in the business, but you don't have your head down of like, I just need to manage the next single family home. I just need to get one more person to hire me as a property manager. You're seeing like, look, I'm in this business. I know this business. I'm making these guys who are taking a little bit more risk than me, but they're making 500,000, million, multiple millions of dollars, and they're utilizing my skills. Because as the PM, you're basically their CEO. I'm like, Cris, like this is what I want to accomplish. I want you to execute it. We're going to talk every week, but the nitty gritty, the boots on the ground, I need you to do that for me. And that's the hard part, And so you're already doing the hard part. Why not open your eyes to, well, how could I qualify for this loan? Well, you know what? These sellers, they're going to loan me $5 million and I'm approved because they want to sell me my property. They're not going to look at like, okay, what's his net worth? What's his global cash flow, blah, blah. Like they know the property can withstand it. They also see your track record in managing, my stuff, which probably gave some credibility of like, look, we're already managing these 300 or 400 units. We can handle your 52 unit. And it probably gave you credibility with your investors of Cris knows this business, he can do it. But now you're on the other side of that. And when I would rehab people's kitchens and build them a custom home, I'm like, man, I just gave this person 6 months, a year of my life. And yeah, I got paid along the way, but there is no upside for me. There is no golden parachute for me. And I want to get on the ownership stake of this thing and start. I'm in real estate. I know how to rehab. I know how to convince people to invest with me in building their home. Why couldn't I translate that skill over to making money for my investors? Yes, but also building generational wealth for my family.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think it's one of the things I looked at is, again, property management's not a sexy business. We're not getting rich. Yes, we're making money. Yes, we're paying the bills. But really through all of that hard work, helping other people that basically took the risk to buy rental investment property, whether it's single family or multifamily, we're helping them attain their dreams and their goals and what they want. And it's like, man, we really need to be doing this simultaneously, right? If you're going to be in the property management business, in the space, you've already got the grunt work. It's a lot of labor that's involved, a lot of administrative work. You've got the team. Why not take advantage of that, right? And then I see the other side of it too. There's a lot of operators that are taking the properties, they're buying the properties, they're subbing out the management. Well, once they have enough properties, they've got the ability to then go and create a team and bring management in-house, bring asset management in-house, what have you. And I think it's a good move. But there is a point where you need kind of some economies of scale to make that happen. If it was just a 52 unit complex, it doesn't throw off enough money to go build your own property management team, right? But if you've got 5, 6, 7, 800 units, then you're talking, okay, I can build a property management team. But then the real question becomes, do I want to? Do I want to invest the time? Do I want to do all of this? Because really the reason we get into investing in real estate is we want to basically buy back our freedom. Like we want to be able to go and do things and not be chained to a desk or chained to, having to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. But I want to just, if you are building the total package, right? For investors, for partners, if somebody's getting something in Virginia, it's like, why? I mean, yes, I found this deal, and yes, I can raise some of this money, but why wouldn't I bring on Cris as a partner? And that's going to vertically integrate into, okay, now we have another 50, 100 doors to manage, which is going to help me smooth out my revenue in my business. But I'm also, you know, I'm an owner. I got my eye on the ball. I want this property to succeed, like, because I'm signing on the debt too. I'm putting my investors' cash in the deal, because that is a very real thing. And I don't want to downplay that, because it's like, as a property manager strictly, if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it sucks, but you're not the one that signed the $5 million note. You're not the one that has to explain to the investors that you lost them $2 million. Like that stress level and risk lies with the GP side. And so you do have to be willing to take on that risk to do that. But if you can, you're going to get proportionally rewarded for doing that. And when you have that in-house of like, man, the buck stops here. Like, we've got the management in-house. These are my employees. I'm going to be on site once a month. Like, I'm leading the charge. It gives investors a lot of confidence. It gives your partners a lot of confidence to do something with someone that's in the trenches. Because we've seen a lot of syndicators out there over the last 3 or 4 years. They've thrown together a deal. There's 10 GPs. Everybody owns 2 or 3%, and nobody, the buck isn't stopping with anybody. And it's just like they all want to be on the beach in Miami, on Instagram, but they don't want to sit on the weekly calls. They don't want to evict the tenants. They don't want to run the marketing campaigns, collect the rent, and make the things that actually make this a profitable business profitable.
So, James, you mentioned it in that, right? It really comes down to a philosophy we've got in our company, and it's extreme ownership, right? Yes, we read the book from Jocko Willink on extreme ownership, but it's just something that we embody and that we take to the extreme level here, right? And it's something as simple as when you have employees and you're like, hey, we're doing delinquency calls, okay? So the employee picks up the phone, they call the tenant, they leave a voicemail, they hang up, and it's like, okay, well, I did the task. It's like, well, we're not looking for, did you do the task, yes or no? We're looking for, did you get the desired outcome, which is actually getting in contact with them, having a conversation, and collecting the money. Did that happen? Yes or no? So if the answer is no, then that means you need to text them, email them, call them, notice on the door, certified mail, right? And then if you still didn't hear from them, it's like, well, what's the next step? Like, we don't stop just because we did the task. And that's just one example of that extreme ownership, but it's also to the point of, instead of, like, I've met with some of these larger groups, and they'll say, oh yeah, we meet with our investors one time a month. I'm like, one time a month and you manage $1 billion worth of their stuff? I'm like, that is insanity. We meet every single week because it gives us 52 opportunities to pull all of the levers that we need to pull to make those assets perform. And if we're not doing that, we're not doing the best we can for our clients.
Yeah, that results driven mindset. It's huge. And my dad, when I was a kid, he would tell me this quote. I don't know if it was from Patton or somebody, but he would say, I know men in the ranks that are going to stay in the ranks. Why? I'll tell you why. Because they simply lack the ability to get things done. The people that get things done rise through the ranks. The people that lack that ability to get those results, they just stay, as a private, and they don't advance the ranks. And speaking of being results oriented, talk to me about this auction. Because this is kind of a twisted path. Tell me about the auction.
So again, we mentioned that we were looking for multifamily real estate, right? And I get notified of this. I think it was 120 units. It was coming up for foreclosure auction here in our local area. I talked to some buddies of mine. I said, hey, basically I could operate this thing. We could buy it. I think we could steal it. It's going to auction. And long story short, I raised $3.5 million from them. They agreed to be able to write the check for this thing and go to the auction. I'm excited, sitting there, and it sells for $5.5 million. And I'm like, okay, not stealing this one. And so I'm like, well, I didn't win it. So I'm like standing out front of the auction house, talking to some folks, just trying to make something out of nothing. At least meet a couple of people in the area. And a broker who was new to the area, he literally walks up. I think there's three of us talking outside of the auction. He said, "Hey, I'm new to the area. I've got, new brokerage. We're trying to grow the area. Here's my business card." I said hi to him, told him who I was, just, a little small talk, not much. Left the auction, had his card. I followed up with him like next couple of days and just said, "Hey, man, I'm in the market. Like, I'm definitely looking." I had two angles because I was angling him for, I'm looking for property management if there's somebody who's doing larger property management, and I'm also looking to buy something. If you find something like not 20 million, but I told him I was looking 5 million and below, and he said, "Oh, okay, that's cool." Long story short, probably a year and a half, 2 years later, he's the one who called me and said, "I've got this off-market deal. It's a 52 unit. It's basically 60% occupied. They can't put it on the market and sell it the way it's at. Would you be interested?" I said, "Oh yeah, I'm interested." And that's how we got the deal. Literally, I went to an auction thinking I was going to steal some 120 unit, which was not the case. And I met somebody, and that's how we ended up with literally the first deal that I've been closed on. So,
And I hear stories like that all the time. Just this morning, Yade and I went over into Monk's Corner to give the owner, or the prior owner that sold to us, $1 million check because she had carried $1 million.
nice.
We closed it and given her a little over half of her money at the closing, and then she carried the rest to help us with the down payment and the rehab. And so, it was a long process to get it stabilized and refinanced, which you were with us through that. And but giving her that $1 million check on the way home, Aiden's like, all this started with a wrong turn because we were at our Panopolis property and he had gotten turned around coming home and gone down the wrong street and had seen this kind of half empty, boarded up complex and thought, that looks like a motivated seller. I'm going to look this lady up and call her. And she said, yes, she'd be interested in selling. And so it's like sometimes these tangled paths and webs, but with that intention of, this is the result I want to get. I'm going to keep on taking the action until I get the result. I'm not just going to, well, I did that. It didn't work. I went to the auction. I thought I could get it for 3.5. It went for 5.5. This doesn't work. Like, this is all BS, whatever. You're like, well, you know what? Let me try to make something happen because I didn't get the result I wanted. So I'm going to take one more action. I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to talk to one more person. And that led into, getting this deal done, closed. So
Yeah.
I love that story. That's amazing, man.
Yeah, it's super exciting to me, just being on the other side of it now. And, I look at it and I think a lot of people take for granted, like, the work that goes into getting a deal to close. Like, even if you have all the money, even all the due diligence, like, there's a lot of work that goes to getting a property across the finish line in order for then the property management and the team to then take on the work, like to do the work, to execute on the plan. So I love the team aspect of the multifamily property space. I think it's so cool.
And you went into that auction prepared. You had a $3.5 million cannon on your shoulder ready to fire, which took work to get that together, to talk those people into, hey, like, if I could, would you? And that probably confidence translated to that broker in those conversations. And you were starting the journey of, when I get a deal, this is how I'm going to capitalize it. This is how I'm going to get my equity stack. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it was super exciting, man. Super exciting.
So Cris is based in Norfolk, Virginia, real property management. Who are you looking to connect with? Who are you looking to add value with, to do deals? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think we're trying to really centralize our operations here in the Hampton Roads, Virginia market. So it's 7 cities. It's Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, Hampton, Virginia, and Suffolk. So those 7 cities make up the Hampton Roads area. And we're really looking to work with either other operators or other people that want to invest in this market. We're actively trying to seek out our next deal. What we're trying to do here is, I've lived here my whole life, is find properties that are in B areas or up and coming B areas that have been managed like Cs. And that's what we found in this 52 unit deal. Long story short, there used to be a mall there. It was the Shoot 'em Up Mall. The mall has since been torn down. Well, now all the shoot 'em up's gone and the area is going through a revitalization, right? So you've got this complex that for decades was run like a C-class low-income property. It's not that anymore because things are changing in the marketplace. So just basically taking some of my area of expertise for living here my whole life and some of our operational skill sets and just investing in our local market. So anybody who's interested in doing that, or anybody who's interested in having a partner that really understands the operational side from property management, systems, processes, key metrics you should be really paying attention to, or in need of some type of asset management, we could definitely help folks out there.
Gotcha. And it's Cris, Cris Bell, just like a telephone bell, Bell. And what's the best way to connect with you, Cris?
Yeah, so the best way to connect with me is through email. So it's Cris without an H, CRIS at the Infinity PM. So again, Cris at theinfinitypm.com.
Cris at theinfinitypm.com. Infinity, I assume, is play on to the cash out refi?
Amen. It's all about getting infinite returns. And that's what we like to do for folks.
Awesome. Well, Cris, I really appreciated having you on the show. Also appreciated personally having you in my life and helping me solve real problems. This check I gave this lady, would not have happened without all the work that you and Tara and the team put into that. So thank you again, man. And thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Likewise, Jennings. Take care.
All righty, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you.